Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where we discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today we're looking at one that's been a long time coming, the solo play in Scythe from Stonemaier Games. No disclaimer needed, I bought the core game myself, and I am focusing only on the solo play in the core game, not the semi-cooperative modes that were added with Rise of Fenris. But what makes Scythe one of Stonemaier's enduring hits? Let's find out and get to the list. We're going to start out with a mix that actually could be a con for a lot of people, and that's the combat in Scythe. When you fight over territories, in a mechanic kind of similar to the old Dune game, you each secretly select an amount of power you want to spend, and you can additionally play some combat cards. Whichever player gets the higher total kicks the other player all the way out, gets all the resources there, and usually also gets a victory star. Now on the positive side, combat is quick, but also very tense, and even though you can generally tell around the values the Automa might use, they can still surprise you. But on the negative side, combat is a bit of an all-or-nothing game, and if you put a ton of resources in and lose, the tiny mitigating factor of getting one card back is not enough to make up for all the stuff you've lost. But honestly, combat is my number 5 because it usually doesn't happen very often in the game, maybe 3 or 4 times in the game total, so don't come in here expecting a war game. My number 4 is mostly a pro, although again it might slide to mix for some people, and that's the actual Automa in the solo game. The Automa is controlled by a simple deck of cards, and their turns are pretty simple once you learn all the rules. They move something, they get some stuff, they might give you a bonus, and then they usually gain a star to move the game closer to ending and move them to more victory points. The only tough thing to figure out with this is the movement, especially with workers, because figuring out which hexes they want to go to and which one is their preferred can take a little while, especially when you're first learning. But once you've played the game 3 or 4 times, even that challenging part tends to go really quickly, and they do have an app if you want a little help with determining who should move where. An important note on the Automa though, they're pretty much just taking over territory on the map and then doing their own thing in a way that you can't interact with at all. So your only real points of contention are in area control. So just keep that in mind, that it's not necessarily doing everything a player would do, just that one thing that gives you some tension. And speaking of area control, my number 3 is another pro, and that's the movement on the board and how you take over parts of the map. A pretty large portion of a player's victory points can come from the hexes they control, either with workers, structures, or combat units. Especially important is the factory in the middle, which can have a huge swing of points if you or the Automa gets it. But that's not where the cool bits of movement end. The resources on the board have to stay with your units and your workers, and you bring them along as you move, and they can actually be taken away if they get attacked. So you don't just have kind of safe things on your board, you have to figure out where you want your resources to go. And they also have these encounter tokens, and if your character, sort of the person representing you, can reach them, you get to have these little adventures that give you lots of bonuses to choose from. This all leads to a game where movement and positioning are incredibly important and generally a lot of fun as you build your little empire. And that empire building is our number 2, another pro. I really love the sense of progression and upgrading each game of Scythe gives you. As you bring out your mechs, you not only have more combat presence, but you also unlock special powers per your faction that affect both your mech and your character. As you build upgrades, you improve the bonuses of your actions, but you also make building other things cheaper. This all means that, like in the best Civilization games, you start from a very small, weak position and feel like you can do a ton of cool stuff by the end. One caveat to this that might bother some players, because you're always building the same 4 types of things, you might get to like one of them and keep on focusing on it in different games, so it can potentially lead to a feeling of sameness, and you might want more variety, which, to be fair, the expansions can provide, but if you're just playing the core game over and over again, you might notice that problem. But we are going to end on another pro, that's 4 in a row, and that's the actual action selection in the game and how you have to balance your top and bottom actions for efficiency. Each turn you move your action pawn to a new space, which gives you access to a top action, which is generally free or pretty inexpensive, and a bottom action, which you'll only be able to do every once in a while if you build up the right resources. And first of all, just the necessity of moving the pawn and planning multiple turns in advance because you can't do the same thing over and over again forces you to think really tactically. But adding to that tactical puzzle is the necessity of efficiency if you want to play the game the best you can. Ideally, you don't want to take a top action until you have the resources to pay for the bottom action and get that new mech or whatever ready. This leads to some tough choices and some potentially clever play. And just to give all of this variety, you have a different player board each game, which will give you different combinations of top and bottom actions. And additionally, you have a different faction each game, which will give you more access to certain resources and less of others because of where their home base is located. So every game is going to give you kind of a different puzzle, forcing you to think of building different things and doing actions in different combinations. Overall, I said it right at the outset, but Scythe is one of my favorite solo games. I really love playing with the Automa, and I think the game's got a lot of legs, even just out of the base set, although adding especially Rise of Fenris can really balloon out the options with the game. There are some warnings for potential buyers. First, if you're looking for either a ton of combat or really deterministic combat, you're not going to get that here. Also, some players are going to find resolving the Automa turns and their movement more frustrating or more difficult to grok. And also, some players might find the way your empire builds up or the way you earn stars to feel a little bit repetitive. Some factions might seem like they have set opening moves that they have to do. So some players might not find as much variety here as they'd like. But for me, the combination of the great tactical movement and the tough puzzle of figuring out how to do my actions in the most efficient way possible really pushes this game high up for me. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.